10 years in the Drug Enforcement Administration taught me one indisputable rule: never mix personal life with professional. But when my pregnant wife ran away with my own informant, and a ruthless drug cartel got on their trail, I found myself facing an impossible choice. Saving the woman who betrayed me, who carries my child, meant jeopardizing a year-long operation and allowing criminals to escape justice. Remaining silent meant becoming an accomplice to the murder of my unborn son. I had less than 24 hours to decide what mattered more: an agent's oath or the promise given at the altar, to be there in joy and in sorrow, until death do us part. 1. The damp rain drummed against the windows of our Portland office, turning the parking lot asphalt into a mirror reflecting the dim light of fluorescent lamps. I bent over the latest reports, completing documentation for the current case. My fingers trembled slightly after an 18-hour shift. The offices were enveloped in evening silence, interrupted only by the monotonous hum of the coffee machine and the muffled voices of news from the break room, where Agent Ramirez was watching CNN. The phone call sliced through the tranquil atmosphere of the office. I reached for the receiver, automatically nodding the time: 19:43. Agent Coleman. My voice sounded exhausted but composed. "Good evening, this is Nurse Olivia Chen from Portland Central Hospital." A soft female voice sounded on the line. "I'm trying to reach Mrs. Lauren Coleman about her test results, but she's not answering. Could you ask her to contact us as soon as possible?" Something in the nurse's intonation made me sit up straight. Over years of working in the DEA, I'd learned to catch the slightest notes of concern in voices. "Tests?" I asked. "I didn't know my wife was taking any tests. Is it something serious?" "Unfortunately, I cannot discuss medical details with anyone except the patient herself," regret seeped through the nurse's voice. "Just ask her to call us back, okay?" Hanging up, I took out my mobile and dialed Lauren's number. Long beeps sounded in the speaker, then the voicemail kicked in. "The subscriber is temporarily unavailable." I frowned. Lauren never turned off her phone. It was our unspoken rule. My job required constant communication, and my wife, being a clinical psychologist, understood this perfectly. I dialed the number a second time, same result. Concern stirred inside me. Lauren should have finished her consultations at the rehabilitation center 2 hours ago. Having parked my service Chevrolet near our house in the Selwood district, I climbed to the second floor of the Victorian duplex we had bought 3 years ago. The apartment was silent. A cooling casserole smoked on the kitchen table, Lauren's favorite dish, which she always prepared on Thursdays. Next to it, an open bottle of Oregon Pinot Noir and 2 empty glasses. She had definitely been expecting me for dinner. I ran my finger along the rim of a glass, not a speck of dust. Everything had been prepared very recently. Turning on the light in the living room, I noticed Lauren's purse carelessly thrown on the sofa. Inside, lipstick, keys to her Prius wallet, but no phone. That was strange. Lauren never went out without her purse. The bedroom was perfectly orderly, except for a crumpled cotton pad on the vanity. The indicator on her laptop was blinking on the bedside table. I paused, looking at the computer. In 10 years of marriage, we had never rummaged through each other's things. Absolute trust was the foundation of our relationship. But now, I lifted the laptop lid. The screen came to life, showing an open Gmail window. The last email was sent today at 15:47. The recipient, Jason Murphy. My heart tightened. I would recognize that name even in a deathbed delirium. Jason Murphy, my key informant, the man we had infiltrated into the Corona cartel 6 months ago. Lauren and Jason's emails told the story of a secret romance that began 2 months ago. It all started with a chance meeting at the Renaissance Center, where Lauren worked with drug addicts. Jason came there posing as a former addict seeking support. In reality, he was carrying out a DEA assignment, looking for connections to the Corona cartel through the center's patients. But instead, he found Lauren. Their correspondence grew increasingly intimate with each day. The first cautious confessions evolved into passionate letters, full of longing and desire to be together. They met secretly, in a small coffee shop on the outskirts of town, in Forest Park, in a rented apartment. Lauren wrote about suffocating in her familiar life, that their meetings had become her salvation. Jason replied that he had never met such a woman, that he was ready to give up everything for her. "Darling, everything is ready," I read the last letter. "I can no longer pretend waking up every morning next to a man I no longer love. You've made me feel alive. In a week we'll be free, just you and me, new names, a new life. Meeting at 5 at the old sawmill. Forever yours, L." I stared at these lines, and my professional life collided with my personal one, turning into chaos. Now it became clear why Jason Murphy's name seemed so familiar to Lauren when I first mentioned it at home. This was the very man our department had infiltrated into Gabriel Corona's cartel, the largest drug organization on the West Coast. 5 months ago, Director Gaines assigned me to oversee this operation. Jason was supposed to gain the trust of drug dealers, posing as a former addict looking to make some money. The plan worked. They took him on as a small-time courier. Gradually, risking his life every day, he climbed the criminal ladder, gathering information about supply channels and cartel leaders. Thanks to his data, the DEA had already prevented several major deliveries of heroin and fentanyl worth more than $15 million. The decisive operation was scheduled for next week. Jason had finally gained access to the cartel's top leadership and was ready to turn in the entire upper echelon names, meeting places, money laundering schemes. For this information, he was promised new documents, federal witness protection, and $600,000 from funds confiscated from the cartel. But now, I clenched my fists until they hurt. Now this damned informant had decided not just to run off with the money, he had stolen my wife. I remembered our last meeting in a safe house a week ago. Jason was beaming with happiness then. "I met a woman, Ethan. She changed my life." And I, like a complete idiot, just smirked. "Don't fall too hard. In 10 days, you'll become a different person." If only I had known. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and dialed Director Robert Gaines' number. Despite the late hour, he answered after the first ring. "Gaines." "Director, it's Coleman. We have a problem with Murphy." "What happened?" The director's voice immediately became harsh. "He's planning an escape right now, and," I faltered for a second, "he's not alone. My wife Lauren is with him." A heavy pause hung on the line. "Mother of God," Gaines finally exhaled. "So that's why he insisted on immediate payment and new documents for 2 people, said it was for his sister who was being threatened by the cartel. That son of a gun. Ethan, you need to understand, he's our best informant in the last 5 years. Thanks to him, we've uncovered the cartel's international connections. Politicians, major businessmen are involved, if he bails now." "I know," I replied dully. "I know, damn it, but she's my wife, Bob." "Listen, son," the director's voice softened. "We'll find them, but we need to be very careful. If the cartel finds out Jason is our man, they'll kill them both. And they're watching his every step, you understand. Right now, I'm going to mobilize all our contacts. You stay home and wait for my call. And Ethan, don't do anything stupid." I hung up and stared at the dark window. The rain had intensified, turning the lights of nighttime Portland into blurred spots. Somewhere out there in this damp city, my wife was preparing to start a new life with another man, with a man I had trusted. And in a week, they would disappear forever, with new names and $600,000 in their account. "Don't do anything stupid," the director had said. But hadn't I already made the biggest mistake of my life, not noticing how I lost my own wife? To truth. The phone rang again when the clock showed the beginning of 11. I recognized the hospital number and felt a chill run down my spine. "Agent Coleman speaking." "Good evening, this is Nurse Chen again," the voice sounded concerned. "Sorry for the late call, but your wife's test results require immediate attention. Since all our attempts to contact Mrs. Coleman have been unsuccessful, and she listed you as the emergency contact in her file." The nurse paused. "Well, I think you should know. Your wife is pregnant about 4 weeks along." I slowly sank into the chair. 4 weeks. So it happened before she started seeing Jason. I remembered our last intimate moment, after my return from a 2-week assignment in Seattle. Lauren was waiting for me with a bottle of wine, wearing that blue dress I had given her last Christmas. We couldn't keep our hands off each other, as if sensing it would be our last night together. "Agent Coleman, can you hear me?" "Yes, yes," my voice sounded hoarse. "Tell me, is the baby all right?" "According to the results, the pregnancy is progressing normally, but Mrs. Coleman needs to start prenatal care as soon as possible. At her age, special monitoring is required." Age: Lauren had recently turned 33. We had been talking about children for a long time but kept postponing. First my promotion in the DEA, then her doctorate in clinical psychology. And now she was pregnant, and planning to run away with another man. "Thank you," I managed. I'll tell her." Hanging up, I covered my face with my hands. Inside, I was boiling with conflicting emotions. Fury at Jason for stealing my wife, pain from Lauren's betrayal, fear for the unborn child, my child, damn it. Who could be in danger if the cartel found Jason's trail? And somewhere deep inside, a faint hope that the news of the pregnancy might change everything. After all, Lauren didn't know. She couldn't have known when she decided to leave. But did it matter now? What if she simply used the pregnancy as an excuse to stay with Jason? "Look, honey, it's fate. Now we can become a real family." I stood up abruptly. No, I wouldn't allow that to happen. I would find them no matter the cost. And to hell with the operation, the cartel, the director's order to stay home. This was about my wife and my child. Professional skills took over emotions. I took out a notebook and methodically began writing down everything I knew. 10 years in the DEA had taught me, any investigation begins with gathering information, even if it concerns your own wife. First, I called the phone company. A federal agent's badge worked wonders. Within 15 minutes, I had a printout of all Lauren's calls for the past month. I knew most of the numbers: parents in San Diego, friends, colleagues from the center. But one number appeared in the list almost daily, usually late in the evening. The calls lasted for an hour or more. I ran the number through the DEA database. It belonged to a disposable phone, purchased with cash, of course. Jason was too careful to use his real number. But the purchase date, 2 months ago, coincided with the beginning of their romance. The next point was the Renaissance Rehabilitation Center where Lauren worked. At this hour, only the night shift remained, but I knew that Ellie, an elderly nurse who had worked at the center for more than 20 years, always stayed late in the break room. She knew all the gossip, all the secrets, all the staff romances. "Agent Coleman," Ellie was surprised when she opened the service entrance door. "Has something happened?" "Looking for Lauren." I tried to make my voice sound casual. "She's not answering calls and she's not at home." Ellie gave me a strange look. "She left around 5, said she wasn't feeling well, but you know." The nurse lowered her voice. "Lately, she's been leaving early often, and that newcomer from the rehabilitation group." "What newcomer?" I tensed, though I already knew the answer. "Jason, I think. Good-looking guy, former addict. He showed up a couple of months ago. First attended group sessions, then signed up for individual therapy with Lauren." Ellie shook her head. "I know I shouldn't be talking about this, but there was something wrong about their interactions. Too personal for a therapist-patient relationship. And then he suddenly stopped coming to sessions, but I often saw his car in the parking lot. A blue Ford, used one." Undercover car, I mentally noted. Jason had been issued the same type for his undercover work. "What time did they usually meet?" I asked. "Most often after 5 when the workday ended." Ellie clearly felt uncomfortable revealing others' secrets. "Listen, Agent Coleman, I know it's none of my business, but Lauren hasn't been herself lately. wound up, distracted, and today she brought in a resignation letter, said she was leaving town. I thought maybe you were being transferred to another office. I shook my head. No, Ellie, I'm not being transferred anywhere. Oh, she pressed her hand to her mouth. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. You've been very helpful, I interrupted her. Tell me, are the surveillance cameras in the parking lot still working? Yes, of course. The recordings are kept in the security office, but at this hour. I have a warrant, I lied. In critical situations, sometimes you have to disregard procedures. I need to see today's recording. The security guard, a young guy named Josh, didn't even ask about the warrant. For him, a federal agent's badge was argument enough. He quickly found the necessary files and opened them on the monitor. 1647. Lauren exits from the main entrance. She's wearing a light beige pantsuit and brown ankle boots. I remembered how I'd chosen them with her last month at Nordstrom. She nervously looks around, clearly waiting for someone. 1652. A blue Ford enters the parking lot. Jason. The car stops in the far corner where the camera barely distinguishes the silhouettes. 1655. Lauren walks quickly toward the car. Even on the grainy recording, you can see her clutching some folder to her chest, probably the resignation letter Ellie mentioned. 1656. Lauren gets into the car. The Ford leaves the parking lot, turning toward I-5 highway. Can you rewind to the previous days? I asked, trying to keep my voice professionally detached. The recordings for the past month showed a clear pattern. 3 to 4 times a week, usually after 5, the blue Ford would appear. Sometimes they would leave together. Sometimes Lauren would get into her Prius and follow him. The route always led toward the Columbia River Highway. Thanks, Josh. Copy today's recording for me. I handed him a flash drive. Leaving the center, I took out my phone. It was almost midnight, but some connections work around the clock, especially if you ask nicely. Kelly, sorry for the late call. Remember you said I could reach out anytime. Kelly Sanchez worked as a dispatcher for the Highway Patrol. 3 years ago, I helped her escape from an abusive husband, arranging new documents and a place in the Witness Protection Program. Since then, she had been my eyes and ears on Oregon's roads. Of course I remember, handsome. What do you need? Blue Ford Focus, license plate PDX 8547. Headed toward Columbia around 5 in the evening. Check the cameras at the city exits. One moment, keyboard clicks sounded. Here it is. At 1720, it passed the checkpoint on I-84. At 1745, it was spotted at a Shell gas station in Troutdale. And at 1810, it turned onto the old forest road leading to the abandoned Cascade sawmills. I tensed. Abandoned sawmills, a favorite spot for smugglers and drug dealers. Plenty of empty warehouses and old houses, perfect for temporary shelter. Anything else? Yes, the car stopped near the Cascade 6 complex. That's about a mile from the main buildings. Know the place? I certainly did. 2 years ago, we busted an underground drug lab there. A 2-story wooden building, seemingly abandoned, but inside, living quarters, a generator, surveillance system. Is the car still there? The last camera at the complex entrance recorded it at 23:15, heading back to the city. One figure behind the wheel, presumably male. So Jason had returned to the city, and Lauren remained at the sawmill, or got into another car. Thanks, Kelly, I owe you one. Come on, handsome. Consider it gratitude for a new life. I got into the car and turned on the navigator. The sawmills were about an hour's drive away. I understood I was violating the director's direct order to stay home, but I had no choice. Lauren was out there somewhere, possibly in danger. After all, if Jason was playing his own game, if he decided to double-cross not only the DEA but also the cartel. The thought made everything inside me go cold. The Corona cartel is notoriously brutal to traders, and if they track down Jason, if they find out about Lauren, no, I couldn't even think about it. At the same time, in Mexico, in a luxurious mansion on the Pacific coast, Gabriel Corona was finishing dinner. The head of the largest drug cartel on the West Coast was approaching 50, but he looked 40 at most. Impeccable Tom Ford suit, silver temples, the groomed face of a successful businessman. Only his eyes betrayed his true nature, dark, merciless like a predator's. Jefe Raul, his head of security, entered the patio. There's information on Murphy. As you suspected, he's definitely a rat. Corona dabbed his lips with a napkin. Speaker. My men spotted him near the old sawmills. He was meeting some woman there. Raul placed photographs taken from a distance on the table. But that's not all. We checked his calls for the past month. He regularly contacted some Agent Coleman from the DEA. He sold us out completely. Corona carefully studied the photographs. In one of them, Jason was helping a woman out of the car. Her face was blurry, but the figure seemed vaguely familiar. What do we know about this woman? Lauren Coleman, the agent's wife, works as a psychologist at the Renaissance Rehabilitation Center. Raul smirked. Amusing coincidence, isn't it? Our guy is having an affair with the wife of the cop who's handling him. In our business, there are no coincidences. Corona tapped his finger on the photograph. Yes, he's definitely federal, a cursed informant. Absolutely, Jefe. Corona leaned back in his chair. The question is, why did he choose to act now? And what does the woman have to do with it? Raul produced another document. We hacked his email. He's planning an escape with this agent's wife. According to the correspondence, in a week they're supposed to receive new documents and a large sum of money. In a week, Corona narrowed his eyes. And next Friday we have an important meeting. All the cartel leaders in one place. Coincidence? I don't think so. He's surely planning to turn us in, collect the reward, and disappear. That's what the new documents are for, to cover his tracks. He stood up and walked to the edge of the patio. Reflections of the setting sun played on the ocean's surface. Beautiful, almost as beautiful as blood on snow. Find them, he ordered, both of them, but don't touch them yet. I want to know their every move, every breath. And when the time comes, he turned to Raul, we'll teach a lesson to everyone who thinks they can betray the Corona family. It will be done, Jefe. Raul headed for the exit but stopped. What about the agent? Corona smiled, and the smile sent chills down Raul's spine. Let him search for his wife for now. Perhaps he'll lead us to them himself. And if not, well, vengeance becomes sweeter when you know the enemy has lost everything before losing his life. He returned to the table and picked up a glass of wine. The game was beginning. And as always, he, Gabriel Corona, set the rules in this game. A man who had built an empire on blood and fear. A man who never forgave betrayal. In 15 years at the head of the cartel, he had learned the main lesson. Traitors always make the same mistake. They think they can run away. But no one escapes from the Corona family. Never. 3. Retribution. The private plane landed at Portland Airport around 3 in the morning. Direct flight from Mexico, officially a business delegation charter. Border Control didn't ask unnecessary questions. All documents were impeccable, and generous tips solved the remaining problems. Gabriel Corona descended the stairs first. 6 men followed him, professional killers, the best in the cartel, all in expensive suits with leather briefcases in hand. Only an experienced eye could notice the subtle signs, the special fluidity of movements, vigilant gazes assessing each passerby, slight bulges under jackets hiding holsters. The cars are ready, Jefe, reported Raul, who was waiting for them at the terminal exit. Men are positioned around the perimeter. The sawmill is under surveillance. Any changes in the target's routine? Murphy leaves the sawmill every morning around 8, returns by 5. The woman stays inside. Minimal security systems, just cameras around the perimeter and door alarms. Corona nodded. How many exits? Main entrance, back door through the kitchen and emergency staircase on the second floor. All under control. Excellent, Corona sat in the armored Mercedes. We begin in 12 hours. I want everything to be beautiful, and let Agent Coleman get to the scene, preferably just in time to see the finale. At that moment, 15 miles from the airport, I parked the Chevrolet in the shadow of an abandoned lumber warehouse. The old sawmill complex was sinking in pre-dawn fog. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, a lonely sound emphasizing the oppressive silence. My phone vibrated, a message from Mike Swanson, a longtime informant from the timber industry. Urgent, meet at Fallen Tree. Concerns your wife. Fallen Tree, a rundown bar for lumberjacks, open around the clock. At this hour, only the most desperate drunks and those who genuinely needed to talk without witnesses would be there. Mike was waiting for me at a far table, nervously fidgeting with a glass of stale whiskey. Skinny, perpetually unshaven former lumberjack with eyes red from lack of sleep. But information from him was always reliable, perhaps because I once saved his son from drug dealers who had gotten the boy hooked on methamphetamine. Bad news, Agent, Mike whispered when I sat across from him. An hour ago, a private flight arrived from Mexico, Corona himself and his henchmen. I felt everything inside me tighten. They know about Jason. Worse, they know everything about your wife, about the escape plans. They have photographs, conversation recordings. Mike nervously looked around. I heard Corona's main thug, Raul, giving instructions. They're preparing an attack on the Cascade 6 sawmill, today at 3 o'clock. Why exactly at 3? They want to wait until Murphy returns from a meeting. Corona likes, Mike swallowed, to have the whole family gathered when he teaches traders a lesson. I looked at my watch. 7 in the morning. Just over 8 hours to find Lauren and take her to a safe place. But first, I needed to make sure she was really there. What else did you manage to find out? They've surrounded the sawmill, but they're keeping their distance for now, waiting for the boss's order. Mike finished his whiskey. Listen, Agent, I know she's your wife, but these guys are real animals. I've seen what they do to those who. Enough, I cut him off. I'll handle it. Leaving the car half a mile from the sawmill, I moved along abandoned buildings, trying to stay in the shadow of ancient Douglas firs. Years of undercover work had taught me to be invisible. The night vision binoculars I always kept in the trunk allowed me to see every detail. The Cascade 6 sawmill loomed as a dark mass against the lightning sky, a 2-story wooden building with peeling paint and a rusted fire escape. Once they sawed timber here, then it was a drug lab, and now my wife was hiding here. I methodically surveyed the perimeter. 3 surveillance vehicles from the cartel, disguised as forest ranger jeeps, at the corners of the clearing. A sniper on the roof of a neighboring shed. The characteristic glint of optics gave away his position. 2 tourists at a picnic, clearly Corona's people, judging by their military bearing. At 8:15, the sawmill's front door opened. Jason, in jeans and a leather jacket, quickly scanned the surroundings and got into the blue Ford. The car moved toward the highway. A minute later, an inconspicuous gray SUV followed. The cartel was keeping a close eye on the trader. I waited until the Ford disappeared from view and moved closer to the sawmill. Now I could see the second-floor windows. A subdued light was on in one. A woman's silhouette flickered behind the curtain. She was walking around the room, talking on the phone. Even from a distance, I recognized Lauren's characteristic gesture. She always tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when nervous. Suddenly, the woman approached the window and pulled back the curtain. I froze, peering at the familiar features through the binoculars. Lauren looked gaunt, worried, but at the same time happy. She was pressing the phone to her ear and smiling, that special smile she used to reserve only for me. My heart clenched with pain and rage. I took out a directional microphone, another useful device from a DEA agent's arsenal. After adjusting the frequency, I could catch fragments of the conversation. "Everything's ready, darling, the documents, tickets. Yes, I can't wait either. No, don't worry, it's safe here. Of course, I'll be careful." Lauren ended the call and pressed her forehead against the cold glass. A dreamy expression remained on her face, so familiar and yet foreign. I lowered the binoculars. There was no more doubt. My wife was indeed preparing to start a new life. Without me. The clock showed 9 in the morning. In 6 hours, Corona's people would begin their operation. I had very little time to decide, act or allow the cartel to exact their revenge. Revenge that would destroy not only the traitor Jason, but also the woman carrying my child. I found a secluded spot between stacks of logs and sat down on the damp moss. For the first time during this endless night, I had time to think. Really think about what was happening and what I should do next. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of shared breakfasts, evening walks along the Willamette River, quiet conversations before sleep. Memories came in waves. Lauren on our wedding day, radiant, incredibly beautiful in a cream dress. Our first house in Beaverton, where she dragged an limping basset hound because she couldn't walk past. The difficult days after 2 failed IVF attempts when she cried at night, and I couldn't find the right words of comfort. Her support during complex operations, when I came home exhausted and drained. When did it all go wrong? Maybe when work started taking up too much time, or when we stopped sharing our fears and hopes, each retreating into our own shell. I hadn't noticed how the woman I loved had turned into a stranger, capable of destroying our shared life without hesitation. But now she's carrying my child. Our child. This thought resonated with sharp pain somewhere under my ribs. The child we had dreamed of for so long appeared at the most inappropriate moment, like fate's mockery. And in a few hours, Corona's people would come to kill them. As a federal agent, I knew what I should do. Jason is a traitor who jeopardized a months-long operation. Because of his selfish decision to run away with another man's wife, arrests of cartel leaders might fall through. Because if we cause a commotion now, they'll cancel everything, and the DEA won't be able to detain them. The criminals will continue to poison the Pacific Northwest with deadly fentanyl, killing innocent people. Isn't this what I've been thinking about all these years of service? Justice, upholding the law, duty to society. But as a husband, as a man who vowed to protect his wife in sickness and in health, could I let her die, even after betrayal, even knowing she loves another? And most importantly, could I sacrifice our unborn child for the sake of professional duty? Lauren betrayed me, that's true, but her sin is merely human weakness, a search for love and happiness, even at such a cost. And if I don't warn them of the danger, if I remain silent, that would no longer be betrayal but murder, cold-blooded, calculated murder of my child's mother. I took a worn photograph from my pocket that I always carried with me. Our first day in the Victorian duplex, we sit on the porch, tired and happy, dreaming of the future. I looked at the young, smiling woman in the picture and understood. Whatever she did, however she hurt me, I couldn't become her executioner. There are sins that can be forgiven, and there are actions after which you can no longer look in the mirror. I knew that saving Lauren might destroy my career. The director would never forgive me for disrupting the operation. Colleagues would consider me a traitor, but none of that mattered. Because some things are more important than duty, more important than justice, more important than revenge. Life, love, an unborn child who is innocent of everything. I got up and checked my weapon. 5 hours remained until the cartel's attack, enough time to find a way to warn Lauren without alerting Corona's people. I would save her, not as a loving husband, but as someone who cannot allow innocent people to die. And then let her live her life. The main thing is that she lives. Time passed agonizingly slowly. I watched as Jason's Ford returned around 2 in the afternoon. The cartel's people immediately came to life. I saw them communicating on radios, taking positions. 1 hour remained until the attack. Suddenly, the forest silence was torn by automatic gunfire. Corona's people began the assault simultaneously from 3 sides, through the main entrance, back door, and fire escape. They operated like a well-oiled machine. 2 kept the perimeter, 1 sniper controlled the second-floor windows, the rest went in for the assault. Gabriel Corona observed the operation from an armored Mercedes parked not far from the sawmill. A slight smile played on his lips. He was enjoying the show. At that moment, sheltered behind a fallen ancient cedar, I was feverishly figuring out how to get to the building. Escape routes were cut off. I saw how the cartel's people had occupied all strategic positions. The direct path was covered by a sniper. The side entrance had surely been discovered and blocked. Gunshots thundered closer. I saw the first group kick in the front door and rush inside. The second team was already breaking down the back door. Time was almost up. Suddenly, I noticed an abandoned van by the far wall of the sawmill. The old vehicle created a dead zone in the sniper's field of vision. If I moved quickly, staying close to the ground. I waited until the sniper shifted his attention to the second-floor windows and rushed to the van. Bullets kicked up splinters just inches from my feet. Someone from the cartel had spotted movement. But it was too late. Using the massive vehicle as cover, I reached the side wall of the sawmill. Now I needed to find a way inside. Broken windows on the first floor caught my attention, wide enough to climb through. Listening to sounds from inside the building, I cleared the sharp shards with my pistol handle. The first scream came unexpectedly. On the staircase leading to the second floor, one of the cartel's men tripped over a tripwire, an old police trick that Jason surely remembered from academy training. The explosion of a flashbang grenade momentarily blinded the gangsters. Taking advantage of the confusion, Jason opened fire from behind wooden machinery. "Diego is dead," came over the radio. "This scumbag has a submachine gun." A second cartel fighter tried to flank the machinery, but Jason reacted instantly. A short burst, and the man fell with a pierced chest. Raul cursed over the radio. "Don't rush in. He's an ex-cop. He knows what he's doing. Juan, go through the ventilation. Pablo, cover." I made my way through the first floor, ducking under bullets. The shootout upstairs was growing more fierce. I could hear Jason's heavy breathing, the sound of a cocking bolt, the muffled commands of the cartel's men. They were cornering him. Suddenly, a woman's scream came from above. "Lauren!" I darted toward the stairs and immediately recoiled. Bullets chipped wood from the railing an inch from my head. "Drop your weapon, Jason," Raul's voice thundered under the ceiling, "or your girlfriend dies first." "Don't listen to him," Lauren shouted. "Run." Jason peeked out from his cover. "Let her go, she knows nothing." At that moment, a metallic scraping sounded from above. Someone was crawling through the ventilation. Jason looked up at the sound, and that became his mistake. A bullet hit him in the shoulder, spinning him like a rag doll. The submachine gun fell from his weakened hands. "Got you, traitor!" Raul emerged from behind a column, aiming at the wounded man's head. "Jefe wants to talk to you, and meanwhile—" He turned to Lauren, who was being held by 2 fighters. "We'll have some fun with your woman." "That won't be necessary," a calm voice said. Gabriel Corona appeared in the doorway. His expensive suit seemed out of place amidst the dust and blood. "I don't like when my men get distracted from work." He walked through the room, each step echoing in the sudden silence. Jason, clutching his wounded shoulder, looked at the cartel leader with hatred. "You know what has always amused me about federal undercover agents?" Corona took out a handkerchief and carefully wiped dust from his polished shoes. "You try so hard to become part of the family that you eventually really start to feel like one of us, and then you betray us, like real family members." Go to hell, Jason rasped. Is that all? Corona shook his head. I expected a more interesting last phrase. At that moment came the click of a cocked hammer. I emerged from the shadows, my pistol aimed at the back of Corona's head. Let them go. Raul instantly spun around, but Corona stopped him with a casual gesture. Agent Coleman, I've been expecting you. He didn't even turn around. I must admit you've surprised me, protecting a wife who betrayed you. That's so noble and so foolish. I'll say it one more time, let them go. Or what? Now Corona turned, looking directly into my eyes. You'll shoot me, and then what? My men will riddle you with bullets before my body hits the floor. You're a DEA agent, Agent Coleman. You should think logically. I am thinking perfectly logically. I stepped forward. If your men open fire, the first bullet will be for you, and you don't seem like a man ready to die for his principles. Corona laughed, but there was no joy in his laughter. I like you, Agent, an honest cop, a faithful husband. Even after betrayal, ready to risk your life. Such people are rare these days. Want to work for me? He slowly raised his hands, showing empty palms. All right, let's talk like reasonable people. I propose a deal. The movement was lightning fast. Corona pulled a pistol from his shoulder holster. I reacted a fraction of a second faster. 2 shots merged into one. Corona's bullet went into the ceiling, while he, with a bullet in his chest, collapsed onto the wooden floor. Jefe, Raul screamed and opened a barrage of fire. A real slaughter began. I managed to dive behind a column. Jason, despite his wound, reached for his weapon and returned fire. Corona's people were shooting from all positions. Bullets chipped wood from walls, ricocheted off metal structures. Lauren, get down, I shouted, seeing how the 2 fighters who had been holding my wife released her to join the firefight. She darted toward cover but didn't make it. A stray bullet, ricocheting off a ceiling beam, hit her in the head. Lauren jerked strangely and slowly sank to the floor. A dark stain began spreading around her head. No, Jason lunged toward her, but a new bullet hit him in the chest, throwing him back. I don't remember how I crossed the space under fire. I fell to my knees beside my wife, pressed my fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, weak, barely discernible, but there. Hold on, darling, I whispered, pressing on the wound. Just hold on. Somewhere in the distance, police sirens wailed. Apparently, some local had called the police after hearing the shootout. The cartel's people, realizing their boss was dead, began to retreat hastily. No time for prisoners. They had to save their own lives. Jason lay motionless, staring at the ceiling with glassy eyes. 2 bullets to the chest left him no chance. And Lauren. I held her to me, feeling blood soaking through my shirt. The sirens sounded closer. Help, I shouted when the first police patrol burst into the building. Need an ambulance, urgently. For choice. Ambulance sirens cut through the night silence. I sat in the emergency room, not feeling the passage of time. My hands were still covered in Lauren's blood, my shirt soaked through with it, but I didn't even notice. Before my eyes was the same image, how her body lifelessly sank to the wooden floor, how the dark stain spread around her head. The operation had been going on for 4 hours. Neurosurgeons fought for her life while I paced the hospital corridor. I didn't pray, didn't believe it would help. I just waited, counting steps and trying not to think that with each minute the chances were diminishing. Agent Coleman, the surgeon, emerged from the operating room, pulling off bloody gloves. His face was gray with fatigue. We've stabilized her condition, but... That but hung in the air like a sentence. The bullet damaged critical areas of the brain. We removed it, stopped the bleeding, but the damage is extensive. The surgeon spoke slowly, carefully choosing his words. Your wife is in a deep coma, to be honest. We can't guarantee that she'll wake up. I sank into a hospital chair, feeling the ground disappear from under my feet. What are the chances? In such cases, less than 10%. And even if she regains consciousness, the likelihood of serious neurological damage is extremely high. I'm very sorry. In the intensive care unit, life support machines hummed. Lauren lay motionless, entangled in wires and tubes. Bandages covered half her face. Only the steady beep of the cardiac monitor confirmed she was still alive. Agent Coleman, Dr. Harris, the head of the intensive care unit, entered the room. "We need to talk. Please sit down." We settled in his office. MRI scans of Lauren's brain lay on the desk, resembling black and white photographs of distant galaxies. "I need to be completely frank with you," Harris began. "The damage is very serious. The coma may last several weeks, months, or become irreversible. In such cases, we usually prepare relatives for," he faltered, "for the most difficult decision." "You mean disconnecting from the machines?" My voice sounded hoarse. "That's one of the options we'll have to discuss. But there's something else." Harris took test results from the folder. "Your wife's pregnancy seriously complicates the situation. The term is small, just 5 weeks, but the fetus is alive and developing normally." I leaned forward. "So the baby can be saved?" "Theoretically, yes. Modern technology allows maintaining vital functions long enough. We can try to preserve the pregnancy until the fetus becomes viable. But what? It's risky. A whole complex of medications, constant monitoring will be required. And most importantly, we don't know how the body will react in a comatose state. Each day of life support will decrease your wife's chances of recovery. Besides, the costs for such prolonged treatment." "Money is not a problem," I cut him off. "What exactly needs to be done?" Harris began explaining the medical details, but I was only half listening. One thought kept spinning in my head. I have a chance to save our child. The child we had dreamed of for so long. Even if Lauren betrayed me, even if she was planning to leave. It didn't matter. Only one thing was important, the tiny life that began before everything went wrong. "You need to think carefully," Harris concluded. "This decision can't be made spontaneously. Talk to your family, weigh all the pros and cons." "No," I said firmly. "I've already decided we're saving the baby." I looked at Lauren's lifeless face through the glass of the hospital room. She had always wanted children. Even after 2 failed IVF attempts, she never lost hope. "One day we'll have a baby," she would say, "and it will be a real miracle." Now that miracle had finally happened, albeit under such terrible circumstances. "I'll sign all the necessary documents," I told Harris, "and I'll find the best specialists, do everything possible for both of them." At that moment, rapid footsteps sounded in the corridor. Director Gaines, rumpled and unshaven, but with a victorious gleam in his eyes. "Ethan, we got them all." After Corona's death, the cartel fell apart like a house of cards. Encrypted files were found on Jason's computer, complete information about the organization's structure, safe houses, accounts, names of couriers and mid-level bosses. Special forces conducted simultaneous raids at 25 addresses. 170 arrests in one night. Gaines excitedly waved his hands. Drugs seized worth $50 million. 4 laboratories shut down. The Attorney General personally called to congratulate on the operation's success. I listened, looking through the director. Somewhere out there, in another world, my colleagues were celebrating the greatest victory in DEA history. The gang that had terrorized the West Coast for 15 years ceased to exist. Criminals behind bars, streets cleaner, justice prevailed. "Are you listening, Ethan? This is a grandiose success. Can you imagine what will happen now?" "Yes, Bob, I can imagine." The director finally noticed my detached gaze, cut himself short. "I'm sorry, how is she?" "In a coma. Doctors say the chances are slim." I paused. "She's pregnant, Bob. We're trying to save the baby." Gaines heavily sank into a hospital chair. "God, why didn't you say earlier, if I had known?" "What would have changed?" I smiled ruefully. Everything happened as it was meant to happen. At least the cartel won't harm anyone else. 2 weeks later, Director Gaines appeared at the hospital again. This time he was in an official suit, with some folder under his arm. "Ethan, I have news. The Justice Minister personally signed the recommendation. You're being transferred to DEA headquarters in Washington. Promotion to Special Agent, full benefits package, official housing." Gaines extended the papers. "This is a chance to start over." I didn't even look at the documents. I sat next to Lauren, holding her lifeless hand. "No, Bob, I'm staying." "Listen, I understand your feelings, but think rationally. Every memory will haunt you here. New city, new job." I said no. I looked at the director. "She's carrying my child. I'm not going anywhere." Gaines sighed. "You realize she might never wake up." "I understand, but that doesn't matter." 6 months passed. Every day after my shift, I came to the hospital. The doctors had gotten used to me. The silent agent who sat for hours by the comatose woman's bedside, reading books to her, telling her about his day. The pregnancy, against all predictions, was progressing normally. On the ultrasound monitor, you could already distinguish a small heart beating in time with the mother's heart. A boy, the doctors said. A healthy, active little one. "You know," I said, stroking my wife's now noticeably rounded belly, "I've been thinking about a name. Remember, you always wanted to name our son Noah. I think it's an excellent name." In response, only the steady hum of life support machines. But it seemed to me that sometimes, when I talked to her, the devices began to beep slightly differently. As if somewhere in the depths of the coma, Lauren could still hear my voice. I no longer thought about the betrayal, about Jason, about what might have been. All that remained in the past. Now only the future mattered, the tiny life growing against all odds. Our son, who would one day open his eyes to this world. And Lauren, well, I would wait, as long as it takes. After all, we once vowed to be together in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health. And Ethan Coleman is not one to break his vows. The beep of the cardiac monitor echoed off the walls of the hospital room. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting Portland's sky in shades of hope breaking through the eternal pines of Oregon.